Two of Isle Madame's people are Dutch war brides.
At the end of the war, my girlfriend came to me. She said, Joanna, what we're going to do? My parents got nothing no more. I said, look in my cupboards. I said, there's nothing no more either. And she said, the money is no good either. But she said, we had jewelry, good jewelry, you know. Well, mother took her earrings off and her bracelets and whatever she had. And I did, and she did, her mother did, her sister did. And we got all that, and we rented a cart with 2 wheels. And we walked shoes. Well, we just had wooden soles with a strap over it. There was no more shoes. And we walked, I don't know how many miles, but it's quite a bit. And then we had to take a ferry with the cart. And we got over on the other side. And then we got to the farm countries. So we hit the farmers. We went there and they said, oh, money, we don't want no money. The money is no good, we don't want it. Well, I said, we got some jewelry here. Well, he said, show it to us. So he took most of the jewelry and he gave us a bag of beans, a bag of potatoes, a bag of dried peas, all kinds of dry stuff, and a big piece of fat bacon from a pig, you know. And we got that. So we slept overnight. We slept in the grass. You know, there was no hotel. There was no money for a hotel anyway. And we slept on the grass, and the blisters on our feet. So we had to take the shoes off, you know, throw them in the cart, and we walked bare feet. Then we came back to the ferry, which we took the first time. And there was the Germans there, and they see us coming with the cart. We had quite a bit. We had also wheat. You had to hammer it yourself, you know, to get the flour out. And we had quite a bit of stuff. So these Germans stopped us. They took all the food away from us and sent us back with an empty cart back to Amsterdam. Tired of the war. 5 years, starvation. And here came them handsome Canadian soldiers marching in, you know, looking for girls. So they passed their cigarettes and their candy bars and what have you around, you know, and we fell for that. And somehow I met Joe. I know Joe 9 months before I went out with him. He was going next door with one of his friends. And then I looked in back of the house. I needed to win an onion, and I went to borrow an onion where he was. I didn't know he was there. And then he asked me to go out, and then we went out, and that's how I met Joe.
When I look at the TV now and I see those lineups of people, you know, in the stores looking for food, that's what it was during the war in Amsterdam. But the last winter of the war, we had no electricity, we had no gas, so we had no heat, no light, and no food. We were lucky. I mean, we came through it, but the last winter of the war, it was nothing to see people falling down on the street and not getting up anymore. And they claimed that the last winter, about 500 people a week were dying, just only in Amsterdam.
The Canadian she married was Connie Madden from Arishat. Connie had been wounded 4 times.
We started to work our way past this crossroads, and we were getting fired at. And there was a chap in one rut, and I was in the other rut. And there was a building in between us where Germans were holed up in it. So I said to him, you step back. I said, if I see anything, I can fire at it. So next thing I know, I got hit. And it was like if I'd been standing, looking out the window, and somebody hit me with a baseball bat in the chest. And that's where I got that. Went right through. An incendiary bullet, and it was about twice as thick as it is now. It burnt its hole right through there. And it was right here. And I found the pieces of stuff in my clothing that was in that. There's parts of the bullet that the casing of the bullet. It was in my clothes. And I got cut across the chest here, so I laid down in the trench that the tank had made, and I hollered at my buddy. I wasn't getting an answer. Finally, I looked up, and there he was, stone cold. He had got the burst. I got one shot, and he got the burst, I guess, from a machine gun.
In Petit de Gras, on the south side of Almadam, Jeff Boudreau builds a wooden mold and pours in a slurry of stone fragments and resin. When it cures, he'll trim it, chamfer the corners, and polish it. In Discousse, on the other side of the island, he's set a steel socket in a concrete base, ready to receive the new monument.
I'm Shelley McDonald. My father is an airplane mechanic up in Port Hawkesbury, and I help him sometimes up at the hangar, putting in and out planes and doing inspections on planes. And my mother runs a bed and breakfast in Discousse, and I help her most of the times serving breakfast. I have to do laundry and clean up the house and stuff. My dad also takes care of a schooner out in the harbor. We can use it when we want to. Being in the video, I got interested in what was going on here in Almadam during the war.
I think it was the 10th or the 12th when they crossed the harbor. It was dirty, wicked, no reinforcement, no planes, no navy, nothing. We're on our own. They claimed they lost 10,000 men crossing that harbor.
You believe that?
Oh yes, I believe it. Because when they crossed, we were there by the shore waiting for them. But you couldn't hold them. You'd kill 100 and there'd be 200 coming back. Because they were just like that, eh? So we kept backing up and backing up and backing up. Until Christmas Day, that was it. Fought at the last minute. But it didn't last long because there was too many of those Japs. So we gave up right there. Threw our arms down and gave out. And then, according to rumors that we had heard, they weren't supposed to take any prisoners. So it didn't look too healthy, but thanks to the good Lord, I guess. Well, we stayed in Hong Kong for about 2 years. But that wasn't too bad there because there's no winter in Hong Kong, eh? Climate was good, and we built the airport. We're the one that built that Tai Kek airport. And we built it by hand. Everything that's on that airport was put there by hand. And then we were taken from Hong Kong to Japan in a boat. I don't know what you would call it, a boat or a junk. There was about 200 of us, I guess, in the whole of the boat. We stayed there for a week. There was the same thing, there was no food. And then when we got to Japan, we were split. Some went to the mines, some went to dockyards, and I went in a factory where they were building parts for ships. That was hell. Because you worked 12 hours a day. There was always a fellow behind you with a stick. If you didn't move, he made you move. The morning that the war ended, we got up, as usual, to go to work. There wasn't a soul to be found. Camp was wide open. First thing we saw was the planes coming over. We said, this is it. They're going to bomb the hell out of us. But it was the Americans. Circled a couple of times, and they came again and they dropped food. There was a little note with the food, do not eat too much. A lot of fellas died. They overdone it, eh? Because your stomach shrank, but you were there. That was the happy day. Oh, it was good. Good chocolate bar. I thought I was in heaven.
We were issued with gray blanket. And this was to be carried no matter where or when. We were to carry that before we carried our shaving kit. And the purpose of that gray blanket was to be used in the event that you were killed. And I personally saw 200 and 300 gray blankets all sewn up, lying around on fields, which were Canadian men, young Canadian men. And this is how they were buried, in a gray blanket. When the tough jobs were there to be done, and I'm referred to them before, those 3 lines in Italy, it was a Canadian soldier that did the job. They were picked to do it, and they did it. And I'm proud to say I'm Canadian.
During our filming, Joseph Landry died, our last link with the First World War, the one they called the Great War.
Well, you get the feeling when you speak to some of these veterans that there's a sort of a certain level of sorrow, that many of their accomplishments going over, even crossing the Atlantic, was an accomplishment, but was never recognized by the people when they came back. And perhaps you might say, well, the plight of those that were left behind may have been as bad in their eyes. Perhaps that's a very selfish way to look at it, but I certainly get the feeling that some of these individuals might have wanted to have been recognized for what they did. Even those who may not have served in combat provided the country with a sense of honor in a different way, whether it be supply or fixing machinery. And I think that we have a whole generation on this island who absolutely don't know anything about the war effort, the First World War, the Second World War, the Boer War. And I remember speaking to one of these veterans not so long ago when we were talking about the war effort and his efforts there, a decorated hero actually, whose daughter had written an article for a school composition, and it was sent home with a failing mark because she was not supposed to write about fiction, and she had written about her dad. And I said, well, what did you do? You know? And he said, I was so hurt that I could not call the principal and tell him what I thought. And he says, the greatest pain was looking in my daughter's eye and really seeing maybe that there was a question there as to whether this was this real? Because kids idolize their teachers, don't they? And teachers can't go wrong. The ignorance of the teacher who was from the area, not recognizing that his neighbor was a decorated war hero. To say that I understand, I mean, they're not going to accept that because I wasn't there. And I'm sure that some of the glue that binds Legionnaires together is the fact that they don't really have to speak for someone to put an arm around them and understand some of the pain that they're feeling sometimes, particularly around the funeral of a loved one. If you've ever attended a veteran's funeral, you will see that, or feel a certain emotion that you can cut with a knife, and a lot of it is unsaid. And I think that that's very important for them to have the Legion.
In those days, depression was on, and work wasn't too plentiful, and I guess that's one of the reasons that some of us joined the service.
And it's true, there wasn't a thing them days.
There was no future for anybody here, you know, things at 39, there was practically no future for anybody. There were no jobs available, things were terrible, you know.
A number of them left under circumstances which were very trying. The island was way behind the rest of Canada recovering from the Depression, and many of them made decisions that it was probably better to die on a battlefield for one's country than to starve to death on Almadam. And they left family and wives and children behind under very poor circumstances. They weren't, it wasn't the glory of what we see on television, where you were being paraded out of your village in a war effort. These individuals left with a lot of pain and faced even more pain that they couldn't even imagine.
And then the war was over, at least in Europe, and Halifax erupted in a riot.
I was, you know, so happy that the war was over. And I think we walked down, because we used to walk down the public gardens, and you know, you'd be almost on Barrington Street. But then it got quite so many people, and then they started breaking windows in the clothing stores and rioting, and I think first it's a liquor store they had, and of course the liquor and everything.
They sent me to Halifax to pick up Miss Hofstra that was stranded there, and had to leave the jeep outside the city and walk, because I guess, you know, they were burning vehicles. There was a terrible mess in there. Windows of stores were all broken. People were staggering around on the street. Some were even in cemeteries with liquor on the top of tombstone, drinking. I mean, it was just terrible, you know.
The riot was not just servicemen